Now, the iPhone 14 Pro is a phone that can be classified in two ways. And those two ways are great, yet pretty mid. Now, the reason that I say that the 14 Pro can be classified as great and mid at the same time is because even though the 14 Pro has given I and many other people rough experiences, there are some really great things that I really do love about it that takes away from the negative thoughts surrounding its overall performance. The comforting size, the new features, MagSafe's capabilities, and even the excellent integration with not only social media apps, but also productivity and social apps that I use on a daily basis. But I will admit, there are some days where the negative thoughts get to me, the subpar software experience dealing with bugs, the slow charging speeds compared to other phones in the market, and a couple more serious things that I want to get more into in this video. And besides my thoughts and opinions on the iPhone 14 Pro as a whole, I want to share my experience with it and help you guys decide whether or not it's actually worth buying. Now, the first thing that I want to cover is something that'll make or break your experience with the 14 Pro, and that's the battery. I've tested how long my 14 Pro lasts with high usage, and during my time of using it, I would get about 6 hours of screen time a day, and even though it's pretty good usage, it didn't stop my 14 Pro from being able to last all day. On average, I was able to end my day with about 30% worth of battery, which is pretty impressive since I was using power-heavy apps like TikTok and even Asphalt 9. I would also have much heavier work days on my 14 Pro, like whenever I got 9 hours doing things like scripting, at work, or filming multiple videos. The Pro also supports 30-watt fast charging, which I had minimal problems with. It charges pretty fast, 75% in 55 minutes, but most of the time I charge it overnight, so it really didn't matter. And even though I take this into consideration, I can't really always be content though. We all know that Apple has the resources to provide us with an iPhone that can support 45-watt fast charging, which is much more fitting for a phone of this price. And now when it comes to usage, I was never the type of person to cut any corners to save battery, and my iPhone had all-day battery life, so most of the time I was charging it overnight. And during my time of using the Pro, I had 5G on, my brightness was on manual and always medium to high with always on display on. I'm using every power heavy app as much as I can, and again, I only use power saving mode a couple of times, meaning that if you're someone who charges your phone overnight, you should be good no matter how much you use your phone. Now, the next thing that I want to touch on when it comes to the 14 Pro is the first thing that you see and feel, and that's design and build quality. Now, the iPhone has always been pretty good in both of these categories, and I'd be lying if I said that the 14 Pro doesn't deliver. The 14 Pro has this very rounded frame at a POV, but when you hold it, it's very boxy just like the iPhone 5 and 5S. The phone's frame fits in my hand very well, and I'm holding my phone for hours on a day-to-day basis, so it really helps to have a phone that's very easy to carry around. The 14 Pro also has a pretty nice weight to it. It weighs in at 206 grams, which is significantly lighter than the 14 Pro Max. And me personally, I like when my phones have a good heavy weight to it. It adds to its premium feel, and I feel like the 14 Pro couldn't have been any better. And now when it comes to aesthetics, the Pro has really mastered that Apple clean yet simple type of style. The buttons and ports were in the right places. The phone was big enough to add to the experience. And even using it with a case, the iPhone has always had aesthetically nice cases that become the true identity of your iPhone, so you really can't go wrong with either. And now looking at display, the iPhone 14 Pro has a 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR display that is really good compared to any phone in this price range. The pill-shaped notch isn't the greatest in terms of spacing when watching videos, but whenever I'm using it regularly, I found the whole aesthetic to be favorable compared to the old school notch. Everything on the display felt very smooth. I think that the 14 Pro mastered the balance between sharpness, accuracy, and a feeling of quality. And as far as durability, the Pro has ceramic shield on the display, which Apple claims is made with ceramic nanocrystals that resist damage. Now, I've dropped it a few times, and I'm not gonna lie, the scratches can get very annoying. But durability isn't the only thing to talk about when it comes to the display. It's very sharp, punchy, and premium when it comes to colors, but it knows not to overdo it. The brightness is a step up from last year's 13 Pro. If you're outside with your 14 Pro, you can reach up to 2,000 nits worth of peak brightness. And where I live, there are many extremely sunny days, and I still didn't really feel the need to max it out since the brightness was so good. Now, arguably, my favorite thing about the display was the 120Hz refresh rate that Apple calls Pro Motion. It complemented iOS so well, and I was surprised that it was able to be this fast and smooth at the same time. Watching movies and content on this phone is amazing. The dual speakers creates that immersive experience when it comes to sound, and the speakers are extremely loud with really good quality. And now the last thing that I wanted to touch on when it comes to display is the array of ways to unlock your phone. And I'm just kidding, there aren't really that many, but Face ID works very well, so I really can't complain. I use Face ID with my mask on, at night, in many rooms with the worst lighting, and it was reliable every single time. But I'm not gonna lie, just like with my 14 Pro Max, picking up your phone every time to unlock it can get really annoying, and I do hope they put a fingerprint sensor on the future models. Now, Dynamic Island is something that many people who have the 14 Pro don't really care about, and based on my experience with it, I would say that you really stop caring about it after a few days of using it. The only thing that I use it for is music and sometimes the GPS, but all of the other functionalities like the timer or caller information can be clocked on my Apple Watch, which makes it even more meaningless. And I'm not saying that it's not good or cool. It is and can be very helpful depending on the app or situation, but overall, I don't really think it lived up to its hype, and I feel like Apple made a mistake by highlighting it as the main thing that the phone had to offer. But besides my opinions on the idea of the dynamic island, it worked very well and I didn't really get any hiccups with it. But be careful because there are people who are experiencing bugs. Now, before I discuss camera, I want to go over some problems that I had to deal with in my 8 months of using the 14 Pro. Now, the first problem was the extreme bugs. I've had the exact same bugs as I did on my 14 Pro Max. There were a couple different scenarios that I can go over, but I want to address the most common, like whenever I'm making a call, it'll randomly hang up within the first few seconds. Another very common scenario is when I'm chilling on my phone and out of nowhere my app will just freeze on me. It also happens when I'm in a rush and really need to show someone something, which is very annoying. Now, the next problem that I had to deal with was very personal that a lot of people who have multiple phones face, and that's the wireless SIM card problem. Now, I change phones very often. I change between Androids and iPhones, so it always helps to just pop out my SIM card and put it into a new phone. But the problem is that for some reason, most phone companies aren't even equipped to make this process as smooth as possible. It takes way too long, I'll get a lot of failed tries, and it's just way more complicated than it needs to be. And now the last problem that I faced was very annoying, and this was on all iPhone 14s across the board, and that's the camera focus. Now, I shoot a majority of my videos with my iPhone, but I recently stopped shooting with the newer iPhones because it can't really focus on certain things, which is very annoying. Like whenever I'm shooting a phone, I try to show off the sides, and for some reason, the 14 Pro and my 14 Pro Max can't focus on it, so I end up just putting it away and using my 12 Pro instead. Now, moving on to camera, the 14 Pro provides an amazing system. It has a 48 megapixel main camera with a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and last but not least, you have a 12 megapixel selfie camera along with a 12 megapixel telephoto camera that is really great in all aspects. The iPhone has always been the most realistic in terms of colors. Like, the colors are always toned down, and you can tell that the photos aren't heavily processed. The Pro zoom photos are pretty good as well. I found the ultra wide photos to be acceptable but not great, but as soon as you zoom in more, the pictures add much more detail and sharpness. I also took some pictures in different modes. You have the standard mode, which is the most realistic. You have the rich contrast that adds a lot of color. You have vibrant, which brightens up the photo, and you have warm and cool, which serve very well as cool filters depending on the occasion. Selfies on the 14 Pro were the best in the smartphone market. I loved how I handled my skin tone. I loved how it looked realistic while adjusting little details. And I've always been a fan of iPhone selfies, and this time is no different. Now, the videos on the 14 Pro were amazing. Despite the minor problem that I mentioned earlier, there were many things that caught my attention, but overall, the clean professionalism stood out the most. You can shoot videos up to 4K, it looks really good, and even though it takes up a lot of space, I think the quality is so much worth it. Stabilization was solid, pans were smooth along with brightness and contrast, and the sharpening was still at its peak. And I want to give you guys some of my random footage that I was able to capture with the 14 Pro. And alright you guys, that's it for my review on the iPhone 14 Pro. It's a good yet mid iPhone that I feel many people are on the fence about, even after their purchase. It has a great display, a buggy software, a good camera, and many other things that can be looked at from many different perspectives, but overall, I still think it's a pretty good iPhone. And let me know down in the comments, would you buy the iPhone 14 Pro right now, or wait for the 15 Pro instead? Let me know. And again, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Peace.